The biggest oil producing region in Kazakhstan is Tengiz in the north of Kazakhstan. It has an output of approximately 750,000 barrels per day, which was due to be increased. Consequently, the existing plant that was there was not enough, so it needed a new plant. This video is about how that new plant came about and how it was erected in Tengiz. The operation can be broken down into several parts. The first part would be the making of the vessels that was needed to construct the new plant. These vessels came from Korea, Belgium, Spain, Italy and Turkey. The biggest problem is that the size of these vessels, there was no way that they could come overland to Kazakhstan, which is landlocked apart from the Caspian Sea. Consequently, all the vessels had to be brought down the Russian river system, mostly on the Volga, into the Caspian Sea, unloaded at the port of Aktau, and then transported by rail to Tengiz. Just to give you some idea of the scale and the size of this project. The whole project was originally costed out at $7.5 billion. This later rose to $9 billion. The particular part that I was responsible for, i.e. unloading all the ships, putting them on upgraded trains and train lines to go to Tengiz, was $375 million. It was also considered the biggest risk factor on the whole of the project. I now want to break down the project as I see it. As I said in the beginning, the fabrication for some of these vessels was all over, but I suppose the most difficult was the ones that were coming from Doosan in South Korea. Once the vessels had come through the Volga onto the Caspian Sea, it then came to the port of Aktau, whereby I was responsible for everything from there until the vessels reached Tengiz. This was broken down again into several parts. The first part being we had a deal with the port of Aktau that if we constructed concrete pads all over the port, then they would let us have the rent of that for free. So this was the first thing that we've done. The next stage was to unload the ships and to store them at the port and prepare them for travel by rail. Travelling by rail is quite complicated because the whole of the 412 kilometres from Aktau port to Tengiz railway station needed to be upgraded to deal with A, the size, and B, the weight. So part of the project was that 412 kilometres were upgraded and all obstacles removed out of the way. To do this, we had to send a train which had a framework on, and that framework was the size of the biggest vessel. Anything that was in its way, like pipes, bridges, overhead cables, new bridges that needed refurbishment, everything had to be done on this. It should be mentioned here that our subcontractors for this project were Bertlings, who were responsible for all of the logistics, bringing everything through the Russian canal system and into the port. From there, They were responsible for loading the trains to go to Tenghiz to unload there. The part that you're seeing at the moment is done by Mammoets, who is one of the biggest heavy lifting companies in the entire world. All of their specialist equipment had to be imported into Kazakhstan, and that in itself was no easy task. I cannot congratulate them high enough on their professionalism and on their safety, as you will see from loading and unloading all of this equipment. Whilst all this loading, unloading and storing was going on, the track itself and any obstacles in its way were then being prepared for the next stage. Now, our subcontractor on this was actually Kazakhstan Railways themselves, which is a very good way of them upgrading their railways at our expense. But it had to be done, and in all fairness, they did a very good job. It's very complicated because anything that's in the way, such as overhead cables, gas lines, bridges that need replacing, refurbishing, railway tracks that need relaying, new railway tracks, new ballast, it's all had to be done along 412 kilometers. So that will be the next stages that we'll show you as we're going through. I've just shown a few of the obstacles that are in the way. Mostly the overhead obstacles tend to be either pipelines or overhead cables, electricity pylons, etc., etc. The biggest problems that we had along the route are to do with strengthening of bridges, redoing rail tracks, and so on, and that will come in the next part of the video. I just wanted to give you an idea here. These gas pipelines, for example, they feed houses to keep them warm in the winter, so they're very crucial to get them right. Same with the electricity. This next section shows a variety of vessels being loaded onto the low loaders of the train. Some of these vessels actually went into the Guinness Book of Records. One was for the heaviest vessel ever transported on a railway line, and the other one was for the longest vessel that was ever transported on a railway line. Apart from that, you will see that there is a tremendous variety of shapes and sizes, all of which have to be firmly attached to the rail wagons, and then a framework is put up for the biggest one to ensure that it cannot touch anything along the whole of the rail track. The process of doing this can take some considerable time. Everything has to be passed specifically by Kazakhstan National Railways, and if they don't agree, it doesn't go. Once again, the loading of these took a lot of specialized equipment, especially for heavy lifting, and then lashing down the equipment onto the base frame of the carriageway. Later, at the end of everything, you will see the longest railway train, which has got many of these vessels on, and it really is something that you would like to see. This next section is purely about the railway itself and the upgrading of that railway. We're going to show you bridge foundations, bridges that need to be moved, overhead gantries that are replaced, especially cables, both 10 kVA and 30 kVA. In addition to that, we will be repairing existing tracks. We will be laying new tracks, we will be laying new ballast, and all this is to support the weight and the width of the trains, which are extremely heavy. I think you will have noticed earlier that just one piece alone was 385 tons, and the largest piece is 501 tons. So there was a considerable amount of work that needed doing. This is just to give you a flavour of that work and what we had to do. The length of time taken to do all this was a couple of years.